Generation X. In general terms, those born between 1965 and 1980. Latchkey kids. Independent. Existentialism. Modern philosophy focusing on personal experience, human ability, and responsibility in an otherwise meaningless universe. We're the cause. This is the effect. We're the Gen Existentialists. Welcome into the Gen Existentialist podcast. My name is Scott.
And I'm Bunny.
And we're here with you today with our special guest, Dr. Pamela Menges. Pam, how you doing?
Fine. How are you guys doing?
Doing excellently. So if you were with us last week, we were talking about all manner of things, sustainability related and energy and new ways to get energy and changing the structure of how we do things. And as we wrapped up, Bunny was talking about Earthships, which is very interesting to me. And so let's start this episode with that and roll from there. Bunny, what was your question again?
The question was, a few years ago, my wife and I went out west and stayed in an Earthship community out in Taos, New Mexico. And the Taos, New Mexico community was started by a Kentucky local named Michael Reynolds, who started building these sustainable Earthships with tires and concrete, and he has a black water, gray water system that goes out into, the black water goes out into the yard, feeds the plants. You've got a greenhouse on the inside of your house. Beautiful things, wonderful little hobbit holes. Also huge into the monolithic dome movement, which is another, everything's out west. Nothing is here, it seems like, to get these things. Monolithic dome is basically where they blow up an inflatable form and spray concrete on the inside and outside of it and create this dome that's really good for weather and such. So I was going to ask you your thoughts on sustainable homes, as we were talking about toward the end, that there's no reason that someone can't build a home in the U.S. now that is completely off-grid. Right. So what are your thoughts on those? We right now are coming from the Kentucky, Cincinnati River Valley,
the greater Cincinnati area. So that's where the show originates.
Yeah, and it's pretty humid and pretty damp. Now I've heard some people making kind of sandbag houses, cob houses, stuff like that seem more like a hippie movement thing. What are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's a thought I have. We're going to go back to my early years in the nuclear field. And when I did my training in the late 90s at the nuclear test site, which we still have, and the nuclear effects area, the laboratory for when we were blowing up stuff above ground, the structures that were solid, flat structures were blown away. The I-beams that were used to simulate a bridge were bent like concentric horseshoes, but the concrete dome wasn't affected at all. So if you want a building that's going to take even a nuclear blast, a concrete dome will do it. Now, concrete domes, there's a really famous one in the Carolinas called the Hurricane House. And it was built because it's in the Carolinas near the shoreline. And the thing is that the concrete dome is an amazing, resilient kind of building if you can get used to like round. And by the way, you can make your inside square, but you can use angles. But a concrete dome building is exceedingly cost effective. You can get a nice space in terms of internal structure, and you can use multiple domes to get the amount of space you want. And you can dig down into the ground and have a full basement or multiple basements, whatever you want to do. And it's just actually a really super way to create something that is insulated and comfortable and really easy to keep. So in damp areas where we are rather damp here, we can't do Earthships as they are normally because you'd have to basically bury a concrete structure. Concrete domes give you that option.
So why do you think there are so few options out there for companies who construct these domes? Because right now I know that Monolithic Dome Institute, they're out of Oklahoma, I believe. They're one of the biggies. They're kind of the monolithic dome constructor, but I know there are a few, I guess they were like apprentices that have moved on and moved out, but there are so few in the Midwest especially. why do you think people shy away from creating these kind of structures? Because they're really pretty affordable when you get down to it.
Well, I think the issue becomes that people just don't know about them. I think it's just a lack of knowledge. If anybody has ever been in this area on the Kentucky side of the Ohio River on 75, there's actually a spaceship. We have a UFO on stilts. It looks like a round airstream on landing gear. So we do have kind of a eclectic community here, but we don't have a lot of concrete domes. We do have some out east of town, but they are more commercial. And the whole concept of building concrete domes has been a commercial enterprise. I can remember driving towards the western part of the United States and seeing a Caterpillar made out of concrete domes. And you know, it's just one of those things that it's going to take a change for people to understand that your houses can look different. And it's you know, Beaver's dead. Let's move on. We can come up with something better than the tract houses that we seem to be still building,
and that are being built kind of poorly too. Because if you look at new home quality these days, the attention and workmanship that's put into everything from the framing to the concrete foundations to the roofs. If you buy a house in a subdivision that some company has put together, be really careful when you go through and do your punch list, because you get a good home inspector, because you're going to find a whole lot of problems.
When you said punch list, I immediately thought of like punching the drywall to see if it's see how cheaply the house is made.
No, see if you can count how many nail pops there are in the drywall. If you get under 10, you've probably missed some. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the problem, is a lack of craftspeople, but also finding a contractor. Like if you go to most general contractors right now or home builders and say, I want this to be a concrete dome, they're going to look at you like, so it is kind of a specialty thing. So maybe, again, like a marketing perspective.
Well, insurance for a dome is ludicrous around here. We were looking at, actually, the 1984 World's Fair in Knoxville had a place called the House of the Future. Mm-hmm. And it actually was moved piece by piece and reconstructed in Florence, Kentucky. You know, just a little ways down. It's right next to a golf course, of all things. Some doctor bought it and lovingly recreated it. It has all the 80s interior. We were looking to purchase it, actually. It was for sale a couple of years ago. And one of the things we had the hardest time with was there was no one who was willing to insure the house. Like, it was such an exorbitant amount.
Really?
To insure it because of the way it was constructed. It was such a unique structure that they didn't know how to...
It didn't fit into their little actuarial tables.
Yeah, so I mean, how can we do a complete walletectomy on these people if we don't know how to how this works?
Right.
So that was one of the deciding factors. The other one was they kept raising the price on us. We're like, well.
Yeah. But I mean, for like talk about the concrete dome, it should be easier to insure because you're not talking about wood framing.
I would think so.
You're talking about a more solid structure that if there is a fire inside,
it will burn.
Yeah, it's going to be contained. You would think it would make more sense from everybody's perspective.
I would think so.
Well, from an earthquake perspective, from a monolithic dome, it doesn't sound like the dome you were talking about. Well, yeah. So a monolithic dome would be much safer and much easier structurally to insure and evaluate. The other thing that we're doing actually with our group is we're creating what people would now call additive manufacturing. So we can create panelized structures using steel frames. We can make them look like anything, including traditional houses. They're low cost, they're inexpensive to build, and it gives you modularity so in the future you can add on to your house or change the way it's configured. And so there are new methods in construction that use masonry concepts so you can have that thermal mass to keep your house warm or cold and have low maintenance. So a lot of the housing developments I've seen recently, they're not masonry. Right. They're panel siding kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Really narrow foundations. Mm-hmm. And I'm perplexed by the cost of them because they're stick built and they shouldn't be stick built.
Yeah.
And it's just easier to create structures that are going to last longer and provide opportunities for people. And I think the whole construction community has a lot to answer for when it comes to sustainability and good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of that comes from building and zoning people that maybe aren't trained as well as they should be and have let stuff go. And it's really key. I'm going to say it again. If you're going to buy a house, find a good home inspector that is going to rip the place apart and make sure that what you're buying is worth the money you're paying.
Sure.
That stuff that needs to be fixed is fixed before you move in. It's a huge key. And if you can do something, if you're of a mind to do something different, buy some land out away from everything and do your own thing. Save up some money and do your own thing. It'll probably cost you far less in the short term and in the long term, especially if you install some of the things we're talking about, the sustainable energy, renewable energy, and do things just a little bit differently.
Well, do you think some of this all comes back to follow the money as well, where there's so many companies out there that are making, the company that makes the drywall is making a killing, the company that makes the, concrete structures is making a killing, whatever, somebody's making money off of it, and that's why things are slow to change.
Here's the thing, and I can tell you this from having worked for Kentucky OSHA and done a good number of construction-related investigations and inspections, and I have no problem with immigrants. That kind of stuff doesn't matter to me. My job was to make sure people were safe. And that's what I did. And that was all I cared about. But the simple fact that most of the people working at almost, not all, but almost every construction site I went to were not Caucasian. Most of them were Latino. A lot of them didn't speak a word of English. It's not their fault, but when they come up and they're shown, okay, pound these nails, put these boards together like this, and they're given 10 minutes of instruction to frame a house, of course there are going to be problems. Of course there are going to be issues. Because the construction company, the contractor, doesn't want to be on site. They've probably got 5 or 6 different projects going on. They're just trying to hire people as cheaply as they can to get the job done so that they can maximize their profits.
Yeah, I think that's your biggest hurdle in the United States, is moving to a more meritocratic system where you have people that actually are trained and know what they're doing.
All those folks doing the work, all those folks doing the framing and doing the basic work, it's not their fault. It's the people who they're working for that aren't providing them with the training that they need, with the supervision that they need. Can they do the work? Absolutely.
Sure.
With the right knowledge, with the right guidance, they can. And that's your construction community for a lot of projects, is those folks.
Well, what we're seeing right now in the inner city is there are major construction companies and development companies that are held nationally that go into communities and will build 500 houses over a period of 2 or 3 years, and then they leave.
Yeah.
And we're not seeing the kind of quality or the kind of requirements in terms of the development area in the counties and the cities that they should be holding these organizations accountable, and they're just not.
Right. It's big lots construction.
It is, largely.
Yeah. It's surplus, get it done quick, make a bunch of money and get out. So that a couple years down the line, when roof lines, when ridge lines are collapsing, when angles on roofs are falling apart, when that straight line that's supposed to be there is kind of sagging in, company's already gone. They're 3 states away building something there. You're not going to get any kind of satisfaction from trying to go after them. You bought a lemon and you're stuck with it.
Okay,
that's what you end up with.
So we'll try to turn this around to a little more positive of a conversation here. I have a question for our doctor in a moment. What do you think are some things that we can do now, like the average Joe Sixpack? What can I do that I can afford that can make my life a little easier that has to do with sustainability?
Well, there are several things that you can do in everyday life. Boring stuff like weather stripping. I'm sorry, people are going, oh, really? Not that?
What's a weather stripping?
Really pay attention to the kind of appliances you buy. Do you need more than one refrigerator? Simple things like that. Really converting your light bulbs. Now that the Biden administration has put a hit list on actual incandescent bulbs, with the exception of the few that can only work in like hot and cold places. I don't think you can actually be arrested for using them, but your easy bake oven's in a lot of trouble. But you have to go to the where those little little fluorescent bulbs and LED bulbs and things, which are great, and do that. Those are, all the problems with those are fixed now. In America, we can't make the drivers for LEDs because we gave that to the Chinese, but you can still get things that work. And so really moving to something that's sustainable is really simple, and there's no reason not to do it.
It sounds like a lot of it is the typical purchases and things that you have to make if you're a homeowner or you're a renter, the stuff that you need for your home. Before you just buy the same old, take a look at what the options are and try to find something that is a little bit more earth-friendly, renewable.
So are there any cool, like, space-age things that'll make me feel like I'm really living in the future that I can do as a person? Sell me on this so I feel like I'm Buck Rogers.
Well, apparently we're going to have flying cars in a few years. I work on one of the committees that has to do with the flight testing of the verticraft. And one of the big things that we've looked at now is that they're not like helicopters. And when they land, they have a lot more turbulence generated by what are called the propulsors, or the little propellers on them. And so we're going to have to automate what we call airside operations. So, instead of having somebody come pick up your luggage, you're going to probably have a robot come and carry your luggage to the pedestrian exit, because people won't be able to stand there because they'll be tumble dried. They won't be safe.
Is this because of the verticars, or they're like drones more than helicopters?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, there are things that are coming that are going to change things. The big problem with we're going to hit AI for a minute, because AI is not sustainable the way we're doing it, and the AI that Wall Street is choosing to support isn't responsible. It's more of an experiment in respondent behavior than it is actually looking at improving automation and things. So once again, we have Wall Street making the wrong decisions about artificial intelligence, when we should be focusing on AI that actually works. And from a philosophical perspective, there's something called engineering phenomenology and the way machinery interfaces with its environment.
Yeah.
So what we call physics-informed systems, which apparently the autonomous car companies aren't good at because they keep running people over. But that's part of the problem. We have tech giants leading development of vehicles. Things tend to be software-based when, in fact, they need to be a combination of software and hardware-based. So the future in general means will have self-driving cars, whether you like it or not. It's coming. I'm not going to be able to keep my truck forever, but, well, at least not on the road. And the other thing is that really to feel like you're Buck Rogers, Bunny, I got to tell you, it's all in your head.
I just
Darn.
Suddenly you're talking about the self-driving cars and wanting to keep your truck, and in my head suddenly Red Barchetta by Rush started playing.
Oh dear.
Hey,
sorry.
That's a good thing. It's interesting to me because I see it with manufacturing, what you would call AI. Lots of times with manufacturing equipment, I think it's done more in the way that you're saying, where it's because it's part of the system and it has to work with the people and the material and everything. There's more of a 360-degree view of it as opposed to just drive the car. There's got to be more to it. And I think you would think everybody would have learned that by now with the technology we've got, that you can't be so single-minded about it. You've got to look beyond your nose. You've got to have a wider field of vision to make any of this stuff work.
So how much of AI, publicly available AI, like your Chat GPTs and your Da Vinci's or whatever the other things, the AI art generated programs and that, how much of that do you think is more of a cultural experiment or a data mining experiment for people versus something that's actually will benefit the world or is useful?
Serious answer.
In other words, are the stupid questions that I put into Chat GPT just to fuck with the algorithm, are they having any positive effect?
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's the interesting thing is I invented an area of AI that uses materials. So it creates its own computational environment so you can't hack it. So it's like firmware. And when I asked Chat GPT about it, it never heard of it. So, no, really, this is funny. I'm a NASA Institute fellow. I think that's funny. Also, the work that's being done and has been done by women is not being put into the AI systems. Women are not being represented. A lot of minorities are not being represented. So to answer your question, the Chat GPT stuff, anybody can buy it. They can go to sites like SourceForge. You can buy it with crypto. You can build your own stack. You can play with it. But what you have to remember is most of the software is largely open source software. So it doesn't have code validation like you have to have for a lot of applications. Now, you were talking about robotics, which is really interesting. A friend of mine, Chris Edwards, who did his work at Case, has a safe robotics company.
Yeah.
Because the issue around robotic safety has become very serious.
Oh, yeah.
Because people are being crushed by robots.
Yeah.
And we have a robot system that we developed and is self-powered, and it can be a soft robot. So it actually utilizes materials that are soft instead of metals to do the same kind of thing. So, you have a move to new types of concepts that are safer. But at the same time, we need to really look at what we're adopting in terms of technologies in a lot of areas. And I would tell parents, if there are parents listening, Chat GPT really isn't appropriate for kids.
No.
And I really feel like it's just experimentation in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I think from a manufacturing perspective, what I feel like I've seen, not just where I'm at now, through the time at OSHA and through the time prior to that when I was in material handling, I think a lot of companies, especially American companies, manufacturing companies, are afraid to buy into that next level tech because they're afraid of buying the wrong thing. I call it they're afraid of being Betamaxed. They're afraid of buying the wrong side and having the other thing that they didn't pick be what actually takes over and
That's
being
Wall
so far
Street.
behind.
That's Wall Street. Wall Street's doing that. Wall Street's like, oh, well, you don't want to think about this because, and by the way, we're not going to fund this because it doesn't give us the return we want. We can't control the technology.
Yeah.
So you look.
But if you're a company and you're on this budget and you've got to automate, because your workers are having ergonomic issues, you need to automate this system somehow. But how do you do it? Which company do you go with? Which type do you do? Because you're going to make that investment today. You're going to have to live with it for at least a decade. Are you going to be able to build it out? Are you going to be able to keep using it? And that, if you're a CFO or you're a controller, that's the kind of stuff that will keep you up with sleepless nights, trying to make the right move.
That's why we've worked so hard to create modular systems, modular products.
Yeah.
And that's been a big thrust of our efforts. The other part is, and it's a sad thing to say, the Japanese are ahead of us in a lot of ways in a lot of the robotic systems in terms of the directions they're going. And it bothers me to say that. The other thing that concerns me is this continuation of trying to anthropomorphize the majority of robots.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always give you the best outcome.
No, let them be robots. Let them be tools. They don't have to smile at you. They don't have to have a pretty face or structure. Let them do the job. They're tools. They're tools. That's it.
I'm just sad that the only way I'm going to get close to being Buck Rogers is to be crushed by a robot.
And on that note, This has been the Gen Existentialists. My name's Scott,
I'm Bunny.
and our special guest has been Dr. Pamela Menges. Pam, thanks for being here,
Thank you very much.
and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one.
My uncle has a country place that no one knows about. He says it used to be